Hey everyone, welcome to our new podcast here where we're highlighting people in the trust economy who are supporting entrepreneurs in achieving their goals in business and personally. Today we're very excited to have Barry Hamo of Hamo Law, an estate attorney who is an expert in the field, come talk to us about things that entrepreneurs should be thinking about and highlight some things that we might be able to take and apply to our lives. So Barry, very excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat for as long
Awesome.
as you.
Cool. So I think a good place to start is just tell us a little bit about you and your business, what area of the law you focus on, and why you chose that.
The short answer to that is my background is in computer science and business, and I went to law school and took all these estate planning and business planning courses that you could take, and then got good counsel and got a tax LM after that, so I can get into this area, and that led me to estate planning and business planning, where I just really enjoyed that. The cerebral nature of problem solving with a variety of different dimensions and variables. It was just very enjoyable and rewarding. So that's kind of where we started here. And believe it or not, 2010, going on year 14 here. So we have an office in South Florida, an office in Long Island, and we only do estate planning and business planning, which includes wills, trust, probate, business planning, start to finish, A to Z, trust administration. And in New York, we do real estate too, but not here in Florida.
Got it. And so you mentioned estate planning, you talked about business planning, essentially the life and exit of a business as a whole. Is that right?
Yeah, from A to Z, from formation to exit, and all of the fun stuff in between. And then you kind of have like a Venn diagram of overlap with estate planning, right? Because you have estates that have businesses, and they need to be addressed to avoid the court system, the probate, the guardianship courts, but also get to the right people with succession planning, or if it's an exit, just helping them to maximize the amount of wealth that will end up flowing into their estate planning in that way, by way of generally their trusts.
Awesome. How long have you had your own business?
We started in 2010, and I think the New York office is in 2018.
Great. And how do you think about being an entrepreneur and how that applies and helps you advise other entrepreneurs? Do you see a connection into the ways that you think about and approach your client service that might be different from a typical large firm?
Absolutely. So I have started some companies, and I'm involved in quite a few businesses in various capacities, like advisor or general counsel. And in my experience, I've been on the ground of some of these businesses. I was able to create software and obtain intellectual property. I've had partnership disputes blow up. I've raised capital. I've actually sold a company. So I feel like I've had quite an introduction to business, more than kind of the conceptual nature of helping from afar. And I can really help with the practicalities of business. And I, the people I work with, the clients that we have the pleasure of working with, that really value our, not just legal, counsel. They just want our opinions. They want us to just be in the loop and just provide our insight, and that's valuable. And that's like the best part of working in this area, really.
It's awesome. And I'm sure actually having that experience to share with your clients goes a long way in building that trust and actually advising them to get to where they're trying to go. Is that right?
Yeah, I do think so. I think I can tell them, hey, do this, don't do this. um, Much more so than others. I believe more so than others can do. Yes,
Mm, awesome.
because I've lived it. I am
So
living,
sorry, good.
and I'm still living it with my own, my own firm, and it's just, I don't know, it's awesome.
Great. Yeah, we'll get into a little bit more.
Right.
So let's start a little bit more on the estate and trust side of it. Um, when someone is coming to you, or let's start with, so when is the right time for someone to start thinking about working with an attorney and building out their estate plan?
So when's the right time? Well, the wrong time is when you can't do it anymore, and that starts with your mental capacity, not even just your passing, but if you
Mm,
can't do it, then you literally cannot do it anymore, and you've lost that window. Obviously, you want to not approach that window. People that are young and invincible, they don't, they're not, they should be doing it. We should all be doing it. I would say there's a strong driver of young parents, new parents. They have kids. They're like, oh my God, I'm supposed to do this. Who's going to handle our kids? It's primarily a guardianship push.
mhm.
Um, I think people that accumulate any meaningful amount of wealth should do it. Anybody who has a complex family where they have maybe blended families, kids from other partners, or just anything that's going to deviate from like the general rules, because the rules are pretty rigid. And I would just generally say that like people as a whole have no idea what they don't know, and how what their current circumstances, how they fit into those general rules would be very enlightening for them
Mm,
to learn. And I think if they learn that, they would take action, because they would realize that there's actually serious consequences to it.
got it. So if I'm hearing you right, you're talking about anybody that's come into some assets that they want to protect, and or people that have some assets that they want to pass on to family members, or things that they want to protect in a certain way. Is that a good way to think about it?
I would say that protecting assets um, is a very big driver. I mean, you call it asset protection if you want, but whether you have $100 million or $1 million, you've worked hard to earn it, and people want to take it away from you. So there's rules that would allow you to protect that are completely available. And people come to me, and I always enlighten them as to kind of like, what's on the table here. I can help them to solve. And asset protection is generally one of those things. But I want to just shed light on the fact that it's kind of twofold. It's during life, and it's also after you pass. Making sure it stays in the family, and it's protected from your kids. Not to say that they're old or young, and children of any age that could be financially irresponsible, have substance abuse issues, special needs issues, have creditor issues, or spousal issues. If you want it to stay in the family, I'm trying to stay in my little window here, stay in the family, um, and make sure it goes that kind of downward instead of laterally, for the many reasons that could go laterally, you have to do your planning.
Got it. So if I'm hearing you right, anybody that wants to direct where their assets go in the event of various circumstances, various scenarios, they're able to define that through working with an estate attorney and through documentation and the rules. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. We take them
Yeah.
to a personalized, tailored approach. No two docs are the same, just like no two people are the same. And I know there's a lot of great estate planning attorneys in the community. I just think that we have a unique approach of really getting deeper and really understanding kind of the first order, second order, third order goals, and just understanding the family and the balance sheet, and just making a personal connection that enables us for the client to feel comfortable in sharing those things beyond who gets my stuff conversation.
Super important, and that's awesome that you've developed that. Say more a little bit. Say more about that. Your special approach. What does that entail? How do you work with clients that might be different from a typical estate attorney?
Well, we have a process. We have like a 3-step process, and the first couple hours is just focused on getting to know each other, making sure I'm the right fit for the client and the client is the right fit for us. Getting to know their family dynamic. Is it a nuclear family? Is it a blended family? Are there people that are, incarcerated in other countries? Are there litigations going on? Like, there's just so much that happens in the world that happens to every family. And it's not like at the forefront of people's minds to talk about it. When you're thinking about an estate planning attorney, you're generally starting with the framework of who gets my stuff like they do in the movies, which is like a little segment of a bigger circle of estate planning. And so we have to kind of get to know each other, ask the right questions, and everything we talk about, we walk them through. Then we send them back because it's a lot. There's a lot to talk about. So it's never like, you meet us the first time and then the next thing you do, you sign. That is not how we do it. We have an intermediary step after we're retained, of course, where we send them a letter. And the letter says, hey, here's everything we talked about. Here's blurbs about the things we talked about. Here's websites and blog posts and videos on the things we talked about. And by the way, here's what we're waiting on you for. Here's where we weren't sure about. We talked about this, that, and the other. So it's just a fresh look at what we talked about, usually about a week or two later. And then that gives us another conversation or conversations to further massage the details. And ultimately, when we sign with clients, I feel very confident that the clients are signing documents that they actually understand, and they're making informed decisions about what's in them. And that's a big thing for me, because I do have kind of a teaching history, which is a whole other story.
Awesome. Well, that's great, and congratulations on developing the process and the approach. Let's get a little bit more into just the generalities of the field. We talked a bit about protection and transferring assets. What are the things that we were trying to protect our assets from, or what are we trying to accomplish with a plan that someone who doesn't have a plan might expose themselves to?
So what are we trying to accomplish with planning that not having planning, doesn't work? Okay.
Right.
So, oh my goodness, that's such an open question. I can go on for an hour about that one. So I guess alluding to the default rules I mentioned earlier, let's just break it down into like incapacity first. If you're incapacitated to whatever degree, it's not a black and white thing. There's people who are slowly, progressing, or I should say degenerating. There's a right word for that I'm totally blanking on right now. But deteriorating. There we go. Slowly deteriorating. Some days are clear. Some days are not clear. Those unclear days are at risk of being taken advantage of by believe it or not, family, as well as strangers. There's people who prey on the elderly, especially down here. There's people who prey on people who don't have the capacity to understand. And so if you don't have docs, you're going to have to go to the guardianship court. And the guardianship court is the circuit court where you permanently reside. And that's a process. That's a lengthy, time-consuming, expensive, and I would say invasive process where you get evaluated by multiple doctors, you get paraded into the court, and a stranger, a judge, is going to decide your fate with respect to what rights you get to retain and what rights are going to be given to a guardian. The guardian may be someone you know and you love and trust, but also maybe not. There could be people who are playing tug of war with you who want to have that control, and they may prevail. Maybe they have better lawyers. Maybe they have more funds. it's a big problem. So making those, financial decisions, healthcare decisions, these are things that are really relatively easy to do to avoid that process. And I think I can't encourage you enough as a listener to avoid that process, because it is a disaster for you and your family. So if you put aside incapacity, then you could talk about, let's say, I would say, death, postmortem, things like going through the probate process. Probate is like the sister court of the guardianship court. It's actually the same court, but it's a whole different purpose. Probate only happens when you pass away. I affectionately call it the postmortem toll booth, because you're going to get to where you need to go, but you're going to have to pay the toll, and you're going to have to go to the process, and you're going to have to get in line. And it's a great analogy. You're probably going to steal it, and that's okay. And so probate is a process that is time-consuming, expensive. It's invasive. It's not private. I characterize it to clients as an invitation for people to cause a problem. Like, not only just like, is it an analogy? Like, you are actually, by law, having to give notice to people, beneficiaries, creditors, to come in and invite them into the octagon cage match, as I say it is. And so it's really a real big process. We do a lot of that type of work. I know it very well. It's a lot cheaper to avoid that process than it is to go through it. And if you care about your family, you don't want them to go through it. Now, conversely, if you don't like your family, definitely don't do your planning and make them go through this as like your ultimate final FU. In terms of assets, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't plan, your assets are going to be devised to beneficiaries by statute. It's called intestacy or intestate succession. Every state has something like it. It's something like it goes to spouse and kids depending on ages. Are they minors or not? And then it's like, kids, goes to parents, then siblings, then grandparents, and then great uncles, great aunts, then flowing downwards to uncles and cousins. It's going to find family. And I cannot stress enough how many times I am cleaning up a mess where the people are shocked and appalled at how much of a deviation the end result was relative to not only what they thought it would be, but what the person who passed away actually wanted. Like, there's times where there's a document that says, here's what I want, but if it's not done right, it doesn't matter. I mean, imagine, I have a case like this right now. Imagine family that is heartbroken over what their father wanted. It's on this piece of paper that I'm holding. I'm not going to show you. And it's what's actually happening is contrary to that because of a legal technicality. It happens when there's spouses. I guess, as I said earlier, the blended family situation. I've had cases where there was a divorce pending and someone passes away. You're still married, and the spouse is going to take some assets, because when it comes to money, people turn ugly. And even if it's taking money out of little kids' mouths, I find the spouses are going to take their legal right to what's called an elective share. So when it comes to asset disposition, you're rolling the dice if you don't plan ahead. In terms of asset protection, I mean, there's kind of like different labels there, but in terms of asset protection, we do a lot of work where people come to us, and that's important to them, but they have no idea how vulnerable their situation is. They just have no idea because people don't know, but that's okay. We'll help you. Creditors awesome. Can take away your estate, your assets if they sue you and they win, but there's things you can do that make that impossible. If not, I would say extremely unlikely, if not impossible. And I'm not even talking about going exotic, like offshore or going to Alaska or South Dakota for a self-settled trust. There's just fundamental things that you can do. I'm sure you're giving the same advice to your clients in the capacity in which we're talking about that's relevant to your business. And so I'm hitting incapacity, hit death, in terms of probate, hit asset protection. I would say a big thing that I deal with in terms of going back to your other question and kind of merging the two questions of making it personal is that, you have a person who has $10+ million and they have kids. and their kids are going to inherit significant money, right? And this is, when we were talking beforehand, about things we're going to talk about, this is going to line up too. If you have, say you have $10 million and you have 2 kids, that's $5 million each, presuming it's equal. When you start doing the math, how much money you think that your child should have? Obviously, if they're a minor, okay, we get it. But like, what if they're 23 or 21, or they're in college, or they're in professional school? Like, people need to be thought through this process about how would that impact your child's life, decision making. Are they on the same path, going to school and busting ass with a $5 million check coming their way? Or are they going to deviate into some sort of alternate parallel universe you never would have wanted for them?
Right.
I find that a lot of attorneys knee-jerk into kind of a trust distribution schedule. It's like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Write a check, write a check, write a check, and it dissolves, and the money's out. And to one of your questions you want to talk about today, philosophically, we don't believe that. That's one of the few things where I'll educate clients all day, but like, I'm going to advise them not to do that. I would say take over your own trust. Let your kid take over his or her own trust up to a certain amount, but leave it in trust, because there's benefits. There's no harm in leaving it in trust. I obviously go through the detriments and benefits of trust in general, so they're very well advised, but like, keeping it in trust versus not keeping it in trust is light and day. And kind of keeping it, maxed out, getting corporate trustees, co-trustees for the bulk of it, being mindful of like how much they're getting, to take control over as they age, to kind of put them on that path you want them to be on. I know some people would challenge and say, oh, it's control from the grave, but like, just think of it practically. Is $5 million for your kid a good result?
Right.
So I'm sorry to ramble, but that's a long one. You asked me an open question.
That was great. There's a lot of things. It gives a lot of people a lot of things to think about. But it highlights the need for a trusted advisor that has a holistic picture of your relationships, your assets, and your goals. Doing this in a silo or in a vacuum seems like it would just create more problems than it's worth. So appreciate you highlighting that for us. Next question I have is common misconceptions that people have. You mentioned a lot of people see movies and they see the wills and assets getting doled out. What are some common misconceptions that people have about the process, and how do you advise your clients to think about it the right way?
Being totally on the spot, of course. I would say the first thing that jumps out to me is that, and it's, on Mondays, I post Mythbuster Mondays on social media. So I'm kind of always trying to think about this. I would say people think they don't have an estate. I don't have an estate. I don't have gazillions of dollars. I don't have a massive real estate property with a gate that opens up to a long driveway with a butler.
Right.
Well, I don't have an estate, so estate planning is not for me. Trusts are only for the rich, wealthy. Those are just false. To give you an extreme example, that I do tell clients this: homeless people have estates. They have the shopping cart with a bunch of stuff in it. Like, they have property, they have family. There's usually a reason, a mental illness issue there, or a drug substance abuse issue there. But there's estates, there's estate planning, that it's just for everybody. So that's a false myth. Another one would be I would say taxes and gifting. I just yesterday had a case where a client and their father, being mindful of what I say here, client and their father decided that they were not going to get counsel and they were going to gift the house during life. And as you as a CPA and planner know, that is a disastrous idea. And they're now trying to unwind that because they learned the hard way, not even on income taxes, but on real estate taxes. So real estate taxes, you get assessed
Mm.
on real estate taxes, so they tripled. And then I enlightened them on the income tax slap in the face they're setting themselves up for in terms of basis and the margin between fair market value and basis that jumps up to a step fair market value on death.
Yep.
And results in a lot less money in taxes on sale following death.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a common thing I'm always counseling clients on. Don't just add your family member to the bank account or the brokerage account or the title to the real estate. You got to think it through. What are your goals?
Yep.
Mostly the goals are to save money on taxes. I mean, I can usually inject that one for everybody.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
That's just two misconceptions. I can go all day here, though.
That's great. No, those are super helpful. Pulling on the tax thread, we mentioned gift taxes and asset transfers and things like that. How does tax come into play with all of this? What are some considerations that you're working with clients on, and when is it right time to bring in a tax advisor into your process?
I feel like a politician because I'm just going to go back to another question.
No worries.
I just want to mention one more thing about what you asked.
Yeah.
Tax planning is not for everybody. There's very important non-tax planning reasons that I deal with. Nothing to do with financial or tax. So I think it's important to mention. For people who have a certain amount of wealth, tax planning is obviously important. The idea there is that at a high level, everybody has, and I should say U.S. citizens have a credit that they can use up before they have to incur or their estate gets hit with an estate tax or during life a gift tax. Right now, that credit is $12.92 million per U.S. spouse. So just round numbers, $13 million per spouse. You have to have $26 billion plus to even be worried about estate and gift tax planning. So we have clients that we're doing a lot of planning for that are very much over that amount, and we have clients who are not over that amount. Two things that are important to mention here. Number one, if you're not a citizen, you have a $60,000 credit. So I'm sure, Jeff, you know about all the people that in the early 2000s started getting their money out of these other unstable countries, and they started buying up real estate in Miami and Broward and all over the United States. They were non-residents with very much valuable, appreciating property. And I'm dealing with those people who are getting crushed on estate taxes and trying to plan for that to be avoided through a lot of different strategies. So non-citizens get hammered on the estate tax. It's about what, 43% rough numbers over $60,000 versus the same percentage over $13 million per spouse. Now, second thing to mention would be in 2026, that number is going to go down to 5 million plus, index for inflation. I think it's a safe bet to say it's by half because, it's right now 10 million index for inflation. So it's just going to be about half of what it is now, I'd say. So say like 6.5 million per spouse or $13 million if you're going to do some heavy lifting on the math there to double it. The 13 million or more, you're going to be worried about taxes. Again, it's about 43% tax on the excess. So you got to think about, do you want that to go to your family or do you want that to go to the government? You have the ability to engage in tax planning. There's a lot of tools. It's completely legal until our government, our well-organized and motivated, harmonious government actually legislates around these issues. But for now, these are the tools and they're available. So anybody that's in the vicinity of, I would say, going into 2024, that has over $10 million should really be thinking about tax planning and using up some of their credit before it's gone because you're going to lose it. We have a lot of clients who are gearing up for that because there's a 3-year look back rule and you want to not die within 3 years of it. So, definitely don't die before you do this. I hope that answers your question.
That's great. It seems like there's a a lot of tax levers that come into consideration throughout as well. So it's part of the trusted advisor relationships you need to have. In addition to an accountant, you need the state attorney. In addition, if you have a state attorney, you likely need a trusted accountant as well. So that's
can I get on light on that, please?
Yeah, please.
So it's a Rubik's Cube. As you can see, there's a ton of different variables and dimensions you got to think about. Our firm is prides ourselves on what we call a trifecta representation, meaning that we really want to work with CPAs and advisors as a team, almost like a personal board of directors. I can't do our job for certain complex cases without you and your firm and CPAs who are very knowledgeable about domestic and international issues. And then the financial advisor comes in, with a very different approach, but it's like team sport. Mm-hmm. And I think that attorneys that are in my shoes, that are doing it kind of all themselves, that even if they have a tax background like me, I think it's a mistake and it's a disservice to their client. And I think vice versa for all of those three professionals, because I don't want to dabble in your space, even though I have a tax background, or the financial advisor space. And I think that by communicating and being open about the planning, the client is much better off as a result.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Having the trifecta, I love the way you put it, personal board of directors between the accountant, the attorney, and the wealth manager. That's exactly how we think of it as well. And making sure you're bringing in experts to participate in each sides of that triangle. So well put. Additional, one more question here is, a lot of people might say, hey, I worked with an estate planner or an estate attorney when I had my kids were born. I wanted to make sure everything was up and tied like a bow. I have my will. I'm all set. Does it make sense for someone to rely on the same will or the same documents they've had for 20 years, 10 years? When does it make sense to have another look? And when should those docs be revisited?
It's a great question. I would say starting with like every 3 years is a good rule of thumb. But it's not so much a function of time. It's a function of life. I think we have an article on our blog about like 25 different things that could trigger an estate planning revisit. We're talking about marriage, your family, your kids, divorce, death, again, all those different people. Mm-hmm. People above you, like your parents, aunts, uncles, come, they pass and give you assets, winning the lottery, selling your business, change in assets and liabilities. You get the point. Like, life changes. Your static, rigid documents are not adapting.
Yep. And
they need to be reviewed. So I don't know, like you do, probably with your clients, you probably have like an annual checkup or, some sort of regular checkup. Like we have that too. We call it a wellness check, and we want to touch base with our clients, say, hey, what's going on? What's changed? And should we talk about it? That's needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I know that so many estate attorneys just want to focus on getting the docs done and moving on to the next one, not maintaining the relationship. And so to hear that you do that, you think about it holistically, I'm sure your clients really value that aspect of the relationship. So awesome. Going on that note, a little further, what are some things that people should look out for when choosing an estate attorney? What are some things that might differentiate an attorney and make them more qualified, or what are some things that people should look out for?
Well, as I said, I think there's a lot of great people in our community of estate planning attorneys. I think it's a very good community of attorneys. There's forums and everybody's helping each other out with crazy exotic questions that you'd never believe. like law school exams. So I think there's a lot of good people. I think everybody has a different approach, though. Some people I think are more sophisticated than others. I think some people are more personable than others. I think some people are more expensive, more accessible, more. I mean, there's just a lot of variables.
Mhm.
I think it comes down to like what your goals of what kind of relationship you're looking for. If you're looking to just get some docs, plug and chug, and be on your way, like that's not for us. We're a holistic firm. We take you through a process. We get to know you. You know, it's just not going to be a good fit. There's other people who I think would do a great job. That would be more cost effective, better fit. There's people who have really complicated stuff that might be more appropriate for a bigger firm that has more resources and more attorneys to work on it, and of course more higher costs. So I think it's with the new, with COVID and kind of the proliferation of online, video as a legitimate means of communication. Some firms won't do it.
Mm.
Some firms are only in person. So
Mhm.
I think it just comes down to not just the technical competency, but I think the relationship and the intangibles. One of the things I do on our intake form is I ask about these things. I want to know what things matter to clients. How do clients identify or define a successful representation? So I'm getting that insight from them is really helpful to help us kind of match what we're doing. And I'm not trying to say that we're the best or we're the only people out there, because there's a lot of really good people, just like like you. I'm sure there's great CPA firms out there, but I know you guys do it super differently, and you have a whole different way of doing it that's very unique. And I really appreciate that, because you can't be everybody's professional. So it's just my way of looking at things.
Awesome. I appreciate that. That's it's clear about how you differentiate your firm and how you work with clients to help them achieve their goals. So, nice job. All right. Let's see. Any last pieces of advice for people before we go?
Time goes by fast on these things. So much to say. I would say my day-to-day of my practice of law is a lot of planning, but it's often made up of dealing with fires, dealing with cleaning up messes. I'm pleased to say that those don't happen from our former planning clients, but if you knew the things that we dealt with every day and how things can really go differently than what you may imagine or want, I think that people would prioritize planning more. That's kind of the end all be all. And I do want to say that, as I told you offline, we are developing software in the estate planning space that I think is going to really modernize planning to kind of jolt people into realizing the significance of taxes and planning and getting the right professionals. And I'm really hopeful it will make a big, meaningful difference, because this really does destroy families. It does. I know countless examples of this stuff destroys families if it's just left at the rolling of the dice, if you would.
Yep. Yeah, we see it all too often, unfortunately, in the news and with clients. But clients are glad to have you to support them and help prepare and prevent those issues to the best extent possible. So, yeah. So Barry, where should people look out for you? Where can they find you if they're interested in having you take a look at their documents or a potential introduction to have you help them with their planning?
Well, our website is the first place I would recommend. That's haymolaw.com. Can you maybe put like a link or something in wherever
Yep.
the podcast would appear?
Will do.
And then I would say we have a YouTube channel called Haymo Law TV, which has hundreds of videos. The most recent of which we did a bite-sized bits of knowledge video series on estate planning, which is 25 videos. It's about 3 minutes or so each, with each video being like kind of its own focus issue. One of which is basis, like we talked about earlier about
Mhm.
gifting life, during life, and after death. It has a whole video on that. Homestead, electric share, all this stuff, good stuff. If you can stomach my face and my voice, I think you'll get a lot out of it. And the other one, is a bite-sized bits of knowledge on business planning, which is about, I think it's over 40 videos, and that goes through A to Z. Formation. Actually, has some non-legal stuff in there too, just because that's what I do.
Yeah.
But formation to exit, litigation, intellectual property, governing documents, transfers, and a couple miscellaneous gimmies in there. I think that business owners, I use it as a tool now, actually, because when we're going to talk about an operating agreement for 2 hours, I want you to watch these first so you're much more better positioned and knowledgeable about those conversations. And so it's, these are all available online. We do have a couple of video series that we give only to clients exclusively. But there's a tremendous amount online. So those two places I think are the best. And then, I'd love to meet with anybody who wants to chat about this stuff.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Congratulations on the library of videos out there. I'm sure it helps a lot of people. And hopefully some people that see this will see more of your material on the web. Thanks a lot, Barry. Appreciate you taking the time, and congrats on everything you built.
Thank you. Will you reciprocate and come on some of our podcasts for our software as well as our new one called Zen Planning?
Would love to.
That would be great. That would be great.